Hello, Internet, and welcome to another fun-tabulous episode of the Comic Watchers Show. He's Chad, I'm Matt, and this is our show where we talk about comics, and we never have to worry about getting FCC threats to get us pulled off the air because we have no corporate masters. So, with that said, how are you this week, Chad?
I'm good. How about yourself? It's nice that it's kind of cooling down
Yeah.
here in upstate New York and not blistering and humid. So
Right. Yeah, it's nice here in Oklahoma as well. So this week, or excuse me, second episode this week, because we had Jimmy Palmiotti just 3 days ago. But and you should totally check that episode out if you haven't yet. But we have got the one and only Grim Jim Zub talking here to
Thank you
talk
for having
about
me.
all things Conan. How are you, Jim?
I'm doing good. How are you guys?
Can't complain.
Awesome.
Cannot complain. So
I can, but nobody wants to hear it.
you're right.
And that's
Yeah.
not why we're here.
Nope,
Awesome.
not in the least. So, Jim,
Yeah.
we're gonna, you've got Conan Scourge of the Serpent #1 hitting streets, I believe, next week.
That's right.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about this new
Sure.
standalone miniseries for Conan.
Yeah, I can. There's a lot of stuff to talk about with Conan. So I've been on the relaunch series at that started in 2023 at Titan. It's going extremely well. We're just busting away on the regular monthly series. So issue 24 just came out last week, and in October we have our big 25th oversized anniversary issue, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. But in addition to that, the way we've been structuring it is each fall after the launch, we've been doing an event. So last year we did an event miniseries called Conan Battle of the Blackstone, and that had a bunch of different Robert E. Howard characters all kind of come together in this pulp epic adventure. And then this fall we're doing the same kind of thing. It's the Year of the Snake, and so we've got Set, the Great Serpent, has a master plan for all of reality, and 3 of our heroes are being pulled into this kind of another grand adventure. And so Scourge of the Serpent, like you said, launches next week, and that'll be running all through the fall. So you get your regular hit of Conan in Conan the Barbarian. You get Scourge of the Serpent for an extra big kind of crossover adventure. And then there's also Savage Sword of Conan, the anthology series in black and white, oversized, beautiful magazine, just like it was in the classic days.
Heck yeah, dude. Chad, go ahead.
Just to kind of step back, kind of what is your history as a comic book reader and a creator, and I'm going to add another question in this week. What's your history with Conan?
Sure. So I grew up, lifelong comic book fan. I think I started reading, other than like stuff in the newspaper and comic strips, but like actually avidly collecting comics probably when I was like 8 years old. My older brother's my proto nerd, so he was the guy who got me into fantasy and sci-fi, Dungeons and Dragons, role-playing games, video games, you name it. And we started collecting comics when I think he was around 10 or 11, and I was probably 8 years old. So we fell in hard with the Marvel Universe. That was kind of our thing. But I started with G.I. Joe originally. I was collecting the G.I. Joe classic kind of comics as they were coming out. And then became obsessed with Spider-Man and the Avengers, Hulk and Doctor Strange and just all kinds of different stuff. And amongst all those other comics, obviously Conan the Barbarian. So I've been reading Conan, a long time. My brother had some of the novels. We saw the movie when we were probably way too young because the original movie is R-rated. But for us, it was like Conan, the movie, felt like what our Dungeons and Dragons campaigns felt like, which is that, they were like serious, dark kind of stakes. These guys were not, they were morally troubled kind of characters. They were thieves. They were, buccaneers and kind of troublemakers just as much as they were adventurers, rather than them being just like kind of knights and good guys or, saving princesses or things like that. They were in it for the treasure. They were in it for the kind of mercenary life and things like that. So it really felt like those games that we were playing, and everyone took it seriously in the movie. Like I found a lot of times when I look at, especially fantasy movies in the 60s, 70s, into the 80s, there's always kind of a wink and a nod to the whole thing. They're always
like, oh, we know how silly this is.
you know, it's goofy. And it was
Yeah.
like, it's so great about the John Milius movie is that like Arnold and everyone is taking it seriously. Like no matter and even it overcomes some of the you know the effects of the time. Because
Mhm.
the music is so amazing, the cinematography is really good, the action's great, and so you're like, oh, okay, the giant snake looks a little funky in spots, but you're so excited and your heart's pounding from the music and everything else. You're just swept up in all of it, and that was really what it was for us. And so Conan really kind of represented that kind of badass fantasy character. And obviously, you know, Dungeons and Dragons, Conan's one of the influences on the original game, and D&D is a huge part of my youth. Like I wouldn't be a writer without D&D. It ignited a creative fire in me that kind of has never really stopped, that desire to want to create stories instead of just passively reading them or watching them. And eventually that would, you know, turn into working in I worked in animation originally. I've done sort of freelance illustration. I started as an artist and now I'm primarily known as a writer, and I've been doing comic book stuff for oh my god, like 20 years now, which is crazy for me to think about, but it's kind of fun, and worked for almost every kind of major publisher here in North America.
That's a hell of an origin story. I love it, and I
Yeah.
love that it involved old school GI Joe comics to
Yeah,
a
big time.
critical juncture point, because that's part of my origin as well.
Yeah, I find most kids of that era, they're either GI Joe kids or Transformers kids. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Some were both. Some are He-Man kids as well, but it's like
Mhm.
it was that was the formative one for me was GI Joe stuff initially. So
Yeah, most
yeah.
definitely. So, who? Let's jump into the big series. Like, what's going on right now in
Sure.
the main Conan universe,
Totally.
leading up to 25?
Right. So the nice thing about the new Conan series is it's really easy to jump in with. We, you know, although we are using the original, so a little bit of roll things back even a little bit further.
Yeah.
Conan is older than Superman. He's one of the biggest kind of genre characters in literature. And but the nice thing about it is there is an overall kind of a history and a continuity to it, but you don't have to worry about that most of the time. You just dive in with the latest adventure. Conan's going to kick some ass. You'll quickly figure out, is this a young kind of impetuous troublemaking Conan? Is this a Conan who's become a veteran and starting to lead other people? Or is this Conan the king? Those are kind of the three major eras of the character. Right. And the original pulp stories, many of them published in Weird Tales magazine, they jumped around the timeline all over the place. Each adventure was kind of its own thing. And Robert E. Howard, the creator of Conan, he wasn't even that strict about telling people what order the stories were in. You can figure it out as you go back and piece it together. And based on how they're describing him and what he's saying, you can tell, oh, he's in his youth. Oh, he's in his prime. Oh, he's a king or whatever. But like the very first Conan story ever published, which is Phoenix on the Sword, he was already the king of Aquilonia. So there's sort of a version of it where you can almost imagine he's telling you these other stories where as they jump around the timeline, they're kind of all over the place. And so I wanted to have some more flexibility when we launched the new series. And so we're following a kind of similar model. The way I describe it to people is you get the info you need when you need it. So we'll jump around the timeline, but it's because we're showing you something either in Conan's youth or in his prime that is going to come back later and be more relevant. So you can read them all in order. And even though you're seeing an older Conan or a younger Conan, thematically, we're building this longer kind of overarching narrative, which is a lot of fun. And I get to kind of fill in the gaps. So for example, like Conan #1, there's a flashback where we mention him in his youth and how when he had left Samaria, he didn't feel like anything could challenge him. And there was this panel that Roberto de la Torre drew of Conan basically carrying this bear on his back. Like he just killed this monstrous bear. We show that actual bear hunt like in issue 13. So like a year later, we come back and show you that and then show you why it's relevant. But we're teasing it, kind of in the earliest, issue of the series. And we've done that multiple times throughout the series where we'll do little asides or Conan will mention some adventure and then we'll eventually come back around to it and show you how it all works. And so the first year of the series was this big kind of epic that we wound out year 2, we were doing a bunch of building blocks towards, the first year builds towards Battle of the Blackstone. Year 2, we've been building towards Scourge of the Serpent. And so Stygia, which is the kind of stand-in for, ancient Egypt or things like that in the Hyborian Age, the snake cults and Thoth-Amon and like all the kind of classic stuff you think of in terms of Conan has been making an appearance throughout this year as we're building these different pieces, and we're showing these little moments that are all going to kind of connect together in Scourge of the Serpent. And that's what's really, like I said, really fun for me, is being able to build out this longer narrative. Like, I've worked on all kinds of different series, but outside of my creator-owned stuff, it can be tough to know, how many issues you're gonna have to be able to tell a story. And you try and foreshadow stuff, or you try and set up long-term plot lines, and you never know with certainty whether or not you're going to get to all of them, or publishing plans change or what may have you. But last year I signed a long-term contract, so it's not exclusive, but Conan is sort of like my focal point for the next, I'm going to be on the series through at least the end of 2027. So I'm going to be doing 50 issues of the monthly series, which is it's just a great space for me to be able to build stories and pay them off, and know that when we set something up, we can, have it drop later in a way that's going to be satisfying and dramatic and all that kind of stuff.
Well, and I mean, not for nothing, but one writer on a book for 50 issues these days is huge.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like, I was talking to Chip Zdarsky about this. He's an old friend, and he was saying, other people might get longer runs, but it's rare that ahead of time you're going to have that many issues. Mm-hmm. And so it is really wonderful to be able to go, okay, we've got the space. We got the space to build. We got the space to pay things off. I can, like I said, I can put pieces on the board and subtly build them up over time, these subplots and these other kinds of things as we go. So it's just been a lot of fun. It's one of the most challenging, but also one of the most satisfying projects I've ever worked on. And these event books that we're doing every fall, they're this nice culmination. They're like a celebration of the year that was, and also like, okay, big, cool sword and sorcery payoff. Robert E. Howard wrote a lot of other characters outside of Conan. Like, depending on how you measure it, there's 22 Conan stories, most of them published in Weird Tales, but he wrote over 200 short stories. He wrote horror stories, he wrote detective stories, westerns, he wrote boxing stories, and just all kinds of different stuff. Characters like Kull the Conqueror and Solomon Kane and Dark Agnes and all these other characters. And so one of the things that the events also allow us to do is shine the spotlight on some of those characters, because even within his own work, he would cross-reference them. These characters are in different time periods doing different things, but he would reuse symbols, or he'd reuse terminologies or names or occult stuff in his stories. And so we're kind of building that tapestry outwards, and we're saying, okay, they're all interconnected. So Solomon Kane, can be doing something that ties into the Serpent Ring of Thoth-Amon, or these two eldritch investigators called Kirwan and Conrad. They're in the 1930s, and they're researching about the Hyborian Age or all these other places. And so it allows us to create this kind of really cool interconnected pulp universe that these characters are all going on their own adventures. And obviously Conan's the flagship guy, but that there's more there. And on those event books, that's where we can kind of flex and show all of them. Whereas in the main monthly book, it's just Conan and the Hyborian Age.
Right.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that Solomon Kane is coming to Titan soon, or coming back.
Oh, we just finished. We finished a miniseries. Yeah, Patch Zerker just finished a miniseries called literally The Serpent Ring. And in the Savage Sword magazine, one of the things we've also been doing is we'll have a lead story that's always Conan, and then sometimes some of the backup stories in Savage Sword will be other characters like Solomon Kane or Kirwan and Conrad, or even Breckenridge Elkins and these other characters that Robert E. Howard created. So we're able to use, again, kind of like Conan's that flagship character. He's the ship, the tide that raises all ships. And so by using him and everyone knows that character, then we might be able to hook you on another character, and you might be surprised that you like these other guys just as much,
Yeah, most definitely. So
now, a couple months ago, I was listening. I was on Audible. I was trying to. I understand what you say when the stories are like take place throughout different periods of time, because the short stories that I was anthology I was listening to. It's like hopped around, and so
Yeah, big time.
it was
But
kind
the
of like,
original,
okay, what?
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying it hopped around, so I knew what you were talking about when you said that, they kind of, the Conan stories kind of hop around, and you have to kind of figure out where he is in his journey.
Yeah, but one of the things that's nice about those pulp stories, like almost every Conan story is a short story. They were all in, the magazine, and you would read them in one sitting. And so what's great about them is how entertaining they are and how quick they dive into that entertainment. Like 6,000 to 12,000 words, and you've got like a complete kind of adventure, and they're just like, you know, heart pounding, instant action, really cool atmosphere. They're beautifully written little stories, most of them. And some of them are absolute classics. Stuff like obviously Tower of the Elephant or Frost Giant's Daughter or, Rogues in the House or Red Nails. These are like classics of, they essentially built the sword and sorcery genre. And, yeah, getting to play in that kind of sandbox has been really, really amazing. A lot of times in the past, people have done adaptations of those stories, and they've been done in comics multiple times. And so one of my goals was I wanted to tell new stories that had that kind of energy and power to them rather than just kind of retelling the old ones, not because they're not good, but because it's like, okay, fans know those stories, and there's no way that I'm going to be able to deliver on those in a way that they haven't seen before. So what can I do to sort of create stories that feel, hopefully, even in the realm of as powerful or as interesting, and then being able to use, like I said, these interconnected kind of elements makes it even more fun.
So you've been pretty spoiled with artists on this run since
Yeah.
it began. Pretty lucky guy in that regard. What did Titan offer to get such
Right.
murderer's row of talent?
It is honestly, and this is the thing. Any comic series is really that art team is, it's the first impression and it's the thing that lasts. Getting the right artist on a book makes all the difference in the universe. And so I've had a lot of great artists that I work with over the years, but yeah, this Titan run on Conan's been crazy. What makes it a little bit different is the way that the series is sort of structured. So Heroic Signatures is the company that has the Robert E. Howard character library, Conan and all these other characters. And instead of it being a licensing deal, like when Conan was at Marvel, that's a licensing deal. So Marvel licenses Conan and everything related to it. And then they publish those books, and Marvel is sort of handling, all those creative costs and what may have you. The way it works at Titan is it's a partnership. And so Heroic Signatures, the actual rights holders of Conan, wanted to sort of have a stronger hand on the steering wheel. So I work directly for them. And so we pick the art teams that we've got on the series. So Roberto De La Torre or Doug Braithwaite, colors Diego Rodriguez or Danica Breen or now Fernando Dagnino and Jonas Scharf. These are all artists that we handpicked to put on the series because we felt like they would exemplify those qualities. And they were also passionate about the material, So De La Torre had been doing these phenomenal kind of commissions of Conan for collectors over the past few years, and he was on our radar right from the hop. And then someone like Doug Braithwaite, he's an absolute, genius. He's been in the industry for decades, and he'd done amazing seminal work on characters like Punisher and Thor. And you could see he had that kind of medieval edge to his stuff, but he'd never done Conan before, but he'd always wanted to. So it's, again, that opportunity, like, okay, let's put someone who's passionate about the material. Let's put someone who has got the style and the fit, the storytelling chops. And because we know it's a long run, we can also give the artists, more than just a regular monthly kind of schedule. Having those rotating art teams means that they can spend more than a month on each issue. And that's why the quality, I think, is really, really there. So, De La Torre does 4 issues, and then Doug came in and did 4, and then Rob came back and did 4. And then it sort of moves from there. Fernando Dagnino right now is doing an absolutely phenomenal job on the Nest of Serpents arc that we just wrapped up. We loved what he did. Issue 25 is sort of separate and different, but then the next 3 issue story, Fernando's coming back, and he's already almost finished that next storyline. We've already got Doug Braithwaite lined up after that. So again, we're giving artists months and months to do the best damn work that they can, and you see it in every single page. And so part of that is scheduling. I've got to be working on in some cases 4 or 5 issues at a time, where I'm planning stuff out deep in advance so that I know, okay, this is, I'm writing issue 30 and 31 right now, even though 24 just came out. And on most monthly books, you're writing usually 3, like as the solicit comes out, that script's getting done and the art goes into production. Whereas I'm like, so I'll give you an example. Issue 25, which comes out next month, is a really, really special issue. I'm going to actually, if you guys let me share screen, I can show off some of the crazy artwork from it.
Chad, do you know how to do that? Because I don't.
Doable? Let me
I don't know if I can do anything from my phone.
Oh,
let's see.
Do you see? So I've got a tab up. There it is.
Oh, yep.
So this, there it is. Check it out. You guys are going to get a sneak peek here. So what this is, these are fully painted pages. So Alex Horley is normally a comic book cover artist. He's a painter.
Yeah.
And he's been doing covers for Savage Sword of Conan and things like that. We gave him a hell of a challenge. What I said was, I want to do this done in one adventure, my first King Conan story, and it's going to have this almost Arthurian kind of legend, like something like the Green Knight or something like that, very fabulistic kind of quality. And we said, if you painted the whole story, how long would that take you? And he was literally like, this was last year, around like this time last year. And he said, get me the script as soon as possible, because I'm going to need probably a year to paint this thing, because it's going to be 36 oil paintings. These are not digital. This is all traditional artwork.
Right.
And so we started designing it up, and literally like a year in advance, he started working away on this story. And check this stuff out. It is absolutely stunning. So that is Tarantia, the capital of Aquilonia, where Conan is king. And as you can see, the artwork is just bonkers. Absolutely.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And then there's this strange kind of wanderer, this beggar, who wants to have an audience with King Conan, and the guards tell him, you're nobody, leave, go away. You don't have enough patience. Conan doesn't want to see some random dude like you. And he essentially waits as long as it takes until finally he gets an audience with Conan himself. And so it's like, this is it builds the first like quarter of the story. It's got this slow kind of moody atmosphere as we set up the stakes. And then once we hit like that halfway point, things just go intense. Some of the most just ridiculous and amazing artwork that I've had the fortune to, ever see in any story I've ever put together. I don't want to show too many pages, but I'll skip ahead to, let me see if I can show you some more of the.
Yeah, most definitely.
Ridiculous. So it's a fully painted story. It's a complete adventure. People will get a story from start to finish, and it's oversized, and it's this beautiful, lush, ridiculous, painted. It's next level. Every week we would get, a page from Alex, and it would just be mind-blowing. That's one of the things that was so exciting about working on this, was having the ability to, give him the space to make this thing as beautiful as possible. All right, hold on one sec here. Here we go. So this is one of the 2-page spreads here.
Oh my God.
Right? It's an absolute stunner, just, next level kind of stuff. So I gave Alex the ability to do kind of highlight moments from, Conan's past. So we get to see these iconic moments in the story. And then also, lots and lots of surprises and big action. So it's just, again, one of the most satisfying projects I've ever worked on. It's been such a joy. And it gave the regular art team an extra, that extra month to also have more space to do regular production. So we're in great shape. I can show you some artwork from Scourge of the Serpent as well.
Yeah, we'd love that.
The artist we've got on Scourge is phenomenal. His name is Ivan Gill. And people don't know him in North America yet, but they most certainly will once this is over. So he's been doing artwork. He's been in the French market for years now. And what happened was he reached out to me kind of out of the blue on Instagram and just said, hey, I grew up on Conan stuff. I absolutely love, I do these French bande dessinée, like these beautiful hardcover graphic novels, a lot of Napoleonic War stuff, and very detail oriented. Like he's got to have all the uniforms correct and show these specific historical locations and just these unbelievable battle scenes. And I was like, man, oh man, your stuff is amazing. And he goes, I'd love to do like a pinup for Savage Sword or a cover or something. And I was like, is that all you want to do? Like, I think, and that the timing could not have been better, because he reached out to me just as we found out that Jonas did an amazing job on Blackstone last year, but then he got snapped up by Marvel for an exclusive. So he's been working away on the Ultimate books now. And so we were in need of an event artist. And I was like, man, I think this guy might be the solution to our problems. And so he really, really stepped in and has just crushed it. I'll show you. Yeah.
Oh,
Everything.
wow.
Again, just
beautiful.
Phenomenal quality. And those are the three main kind of players in our story here. So we've got Conan, we've got Brule the Spear Slayer, and then we've got Kirwin. And again, the locations are stunning. One of the things I love about his work is he creates this incredible sense of place. So all the environments are just beautifully thought out and designed. The storytelling is super sharp. And from top to bottom, it is just amazing. And so in this story, we're actually cutting between sort of three different time periods. We've got the Hyborian Age, which is your classic kind of Conan era. We've got something called the Thurian Age, which is Kull the Conqueror, who's in an era before Conan.
Okay.
So if you want to think of it in a way that makes sense, when Conan's going through all these ruins and he's like delving into these strange places and destroyed finding old relics, he's finding stuff from the era of Kull the Conqueror. That's what he's essentially traversing through. And then we've also got the 1930s with Professor Kirwan, this eldritch investigator. And so all three of them are getting pulled into this conspiracy in and around snakes and Set, the snake god. And so as each character sort of goes on this journey, what they end up doing ends up sort of reflecting and echoing off of each other. So it's been a ton of fun to build this kind of multi-layered story.
That's awesome. I love it. And I love that you're able to pull all these different characters into it. So you were saying, there we go. So you were saying earlier how there's three different eras for Conan, the young warrior, the seasoned leader, and then the king.
Yeah.
And this is your first king story, issue 25.
Yeah.
What's like prior to that? What's been your favorite era of Conan to write?
Honestly, I like him when he's young and kind of figuring out his way in the world. I love putting him into strange places and him not knowing, what the right thing to do is, and being kind of, bullheaded and courageous because he doesn't know any better, and thrusting himself into all sorts of ludicrously dangerous situations. That feels very Dungeons and Dragons to me. So it's definitely one of the things I really enjoy doing when I'm writing the character is I like having, a character who's motivated and pushing forward rather than kind of world weary. I find it's just more energy, more excitement. But I have to admit, it was fun to do King Conan for the first time. So I'm certainly going to revisiting that in the future for sure.
Yeah. Chad?
So when you're sitting down to write Conan, do you have a ritual or something you do to pump yourself up or to get you in the Conan frame of mind?
Sure.
You have a sword you swing around, and
I don't know. Well, I do have a sword, but that's a whole different thing. But for me, it is really about kind of touching base with the original material. So I'll usually read one of the short stories when I'm digging in, especially if I'm doing dialogue and narration, because I did a lot of research when I started on the Titan series in particular. I kind of marinated myself in that original source material, the original pulps. And Howard's got a real cadence, the way he structures a sentence, the way he does the dialogue, the way he describes places. And I wanted as much of that narrative kind of quality, not copying it word for word, but just trying to understand the kind of vocabulary and the rhythm that he uses in a sentence or for the dialogue between characters, and imbue as much of that as I can into the comics. And sometimes I've seen it, like obviously Roy Thomas would do quite a bit of that. And there were other writers who seemed to hit it here and there, but there are periods of Conan comics that just feel they can feel a little generic, like kill an evil wizard, save the princess kind of stuff. And I was like,
Right.
okay, the actual original Conan stories have a lot of variety. Some of them are very, very different. Some of them are like, you know, there's a murder mystery one. There's ones where they're capers and heists. There's other ones where they're essentially just like a revenge tale or a strange, like I said, like a fable, like something out of a fairy tale with a darker kind of a sheen to it. And so I just wanted to be able to kind of hit all those different types of notes, that we can do those kinds of stories in the comics. And we should be doing more of that. We should be pushing into those horror aspects or into those Lovecraftian kind of mind-bending sort of things, because those are the stories that are going to be a lot more memorable than just like Conan kills a monster, you know, kind of stuff.
So looking back at the Conan comics, like Marvel or Dark Horse, whatever, do you have any particular favorite standouts?
For sure. So when Conan, it's interesting, like the original Conan comic started in the 70s. The character really is generational. Like the original pulp stories are in the 30s. They would eventually be reprinted in the late 40s and into the 50s. And that got them a new audience. In the 60s, that's when you have the paperbacks with the Frank Frazetta covers that sell millions of copies and really put the character on the map. And then in the 70s, 1970, you've got, you know, this one right here, Conan #1, right? So that's the original first issue. And so that kind of kicks off the Bronze Age, but it also, you know, becomes the bedrock of popularity for the character through the 70s. And Marvel had a rough period there, but like Conan, Star Wars, and Spider-Man essentially kept Marvel afloat, right? And so Conan was popular enough that they weren't just doing the monthly issues. They also did the black and white magazine. That's when Savage Sword of Conan kicks off. And because it was a magazine, they didn't have to follow the Comics Code Authority. Right. So it's more violent and it's a little more salacious, more like the pulps. And those, particularly the first 2 to 3 years of Savage Sword, they're pretty phenomenal stuff. Like John Buscema is like at the height of his powers. They end up getting an inker on him named Alfredo Alcala. And they do these adaptations of some of the original Howard stories and also some original stuff that is absolutely stunning. The texture in that black and white artwork is phenomenal. Barry Windsor Smith really kind of comes into his own, and they do an absolutely phenomenal adaptation of Red Nails. Just a lot of artists who would eventually become a thing. Everyone from like Mike Mignola to Mike Kaluta to fantasy illustrators like you know, Jeff Easley. Some of their very first professional work are like pinups in, you know, Savage Sword magazine. Mark Silvestri, one of his first books he ever drew was Conan. You know, it's like this book became like a training ground and it became a showcase for people's amazing artwork. And so the early Savage Sword stuff, I think if you haven't had a chance to check it out, it is really, really worth, you know, digging into those collections for sure.
Well, I think Titan has a collection of it, or at least
big time. Yeah. That's what these are here. So Marvel did a series of collections, and now Titan has reprinted them as well. If you have any of the Marvel ones, you can just continue because they've got the exact same kind of design on them. So on the shelf, they just sit side by side, you know, really, really effortlessly. So yeah, they're amazing. Just they're great, inspiring comics. They're beautifully drawn, and they kind of set that bar for us on the team. Like, okay, this is what, you know, the best of the best. We've got to try and strive to hit that, you know, as much as close as possible.
So you've been writing Conan for a while.
Yeah,
I think when we chatted in 2021, you were writing, I think writing it for Marvel.
That's
right. So how has your approach, if it has, how has it changed, grown?
Yeah, it's
time?
Pretty surreal. Like by now, I think the only person who has more Conan comic writing is probably Roy Thomas. As far as I know, I'm now number 2, which feels pretty crazy to me.
Right.
Because overall, the miniseries and Savage Sword and the regular series, I've written now about 60 issues of Conan, which is amazing. And obviously I have more to go. The Marvel stuff was really fun to do, but it was also, I was picking up from where Jason did the first 12 issues of the monthly. And then I started with issue 13. And so that was, I got offered the book and then I just had to hit the ground running. And so I didn't really have a master plan. It was more just like, okay, let's exemplify kind of classic, action adventure and sword and sorcery as much as I can. And then eventually we started to figure out some subplots and where we could go over the long haul. The nice thing about the new Titan run is we pitched this big mythic story, right from the hop. They promised me at least 12 issues. And then once it started selling as well as it has, they were like, okay, we know you have bigger plans. And I laid out this massive, 50 issue concept. And they were like, great, let's put a ring on it and let's do it. And so that's been a huge difference for me, is knowing where we're at and where we're going, being able to put those milestones down and know that we're going to be able to hit them. And whereas at Marvel, it was more just like, every 6 issues or so, you're like, okay, are we still going? You sort of pop your head up. All right, are we doing it? Are we canceled? What's going on? And then we also rammed right into the lockdowns and the pandemic. And so that was just like the most surreal feeling, where right in the middle of my Conan run, we had a massive publishing gap. And I didn't even know if I would ever see the end of that story. And so it's just a very different feeling now, because obviously I know where we're at and I know where we're going to be at. And it's just like doing it at Marvel was a ton of fun. Everyone that worked on the series there, all the different artists I got to work with at Marvel were great. My editor, Mark Basso, was wonderful, but it was just like it was a licensed gig, you know what I mean? Whereas now I work for the owners of Conan and we talk directly. My editor and his boss are the 2 people I need to convince on terms of any storyline that I want to do and where we're heading with the overall thing. And we've got a lot of trust, and that's made a huge difference in terms of the consistency and the quality.
How has that relationship been with the owners of the Conan and Robert E. Howard estate?
Well, it's not the Robert E. Howard estate. So the rights to Conan were sold like, oh God, I think they were originally sold in like the 50s and 60s. So they've been through multiple hands by this point. Mm-hmm. And, but like Fred Malmberg and Heroic Signatures, they've had the rights to it now for, I don't want to put in at least 15, if not 20 years. They were doing stuff with Dark Horse when it was at Dark Horse. Right. So, I get along amazing with them. They were full speed ahead when I got put on the book at Marvel, and they really enjoyed what I was doing. What happened was I had written the character. My first time I ever wrote Conan was in 2015. Gail Simone and I did the Conan Red Sonja crossover miniseries that was at Dark Horse. First time those characters had crossed over in like 15 or 16 years. And it was a ton of fun, but I thought that would be my only shot to ever do it. And then a few years later, I'm at Marvel. I find out the character's coming back. I wrote the character in an Avengers story called No Road Home, which was this weekly event book where we brought Conan into the Marvel Universe. And at the very end, I deposited him in the Savage Land. And then Jerry Duggan did Savage Avengers. He kind of picked it up from there. But I really wanted to do stuff in the classic Hyborian age. And so Jason was doing the regular monthly series, and he almost always does long runs on books. So I was like, I'll never get a chance to write this character again. He's going to be doing this thing for years and years and years. And but they had an anthology series. They were doing Savage Sword, but instead of the black and white magazine, they were just doing it as a regular kind of color book with different creative teams. So I pitched the editor on just like a self-contained story, very much in the mold of a Robert E. Howard story, with kind of crazy stakes and nasty, weird supernatural stuff. And it was called The Gambler, and that got published. And what I didn't know, Jason was only going to be on the series for a year. And so The Gambler came out right as they were starting to look for another writer. And the Robert E., like the Heroic Signatures guys, saw the story, and they were like, what about this guy? This is really sharp. Like, this feels like the pulps. and Mark, the editor, already knew me and they trusted me. And so they reached out and asked me to do a mini series called Serpent War, which was, it had Moon Knight in it and Conan the Barbarian and Solomon Kane and a couple other characters. And so I did that kind of Robert E. Howard crossover in the Marvel universe. And they were like, okay, Jim's the guy. And so they offered me the monthly book. And it was kind of mind blowing to me because I didn't see that coming. And I didn't have long, like I said, I kind of hit the ground running and just had to dive right into it. It was fun, like, but with the pandemic and everything else, it certainly made it a rocky ride. And then when that all wrapped up in Marvel, I thought that would be my only chance to write the character, and getting another shot here with the Titan series it's really transformed my career. Honestly, it's kind of changed the game for me. Like having this long-term series and building these bigger narratives, I think people can really now see hopefully what I'm capable of, and really kind of deliver on all fronts.
With all the work you're doing on Conan, am I correct? You're also a teacher.
I was a teacher,
Professor?
so
Oh,
I've
you
been
were. Okay,
teaching.
you were.
Yeah, so I actually stepped down earlier this year, and so I've been teaching for the
Conan
last,
work.
yeah. Well, for the last 19 years, I was prof up on the York University campus teaching in this animation program at Seneca College. For a while there, I was actually the head of the program. So I was doing curriculum development and hiring instructors and all sorts of things while I was juggling, a creative career in writing comics and doing conventions. And it was a lot of stress. I really enjoyed it and I loved doing it. But like I was teaching classes and doing lectures while I was writing the Avengers or while I was doing, like Samurai Jack or Dungeons and Dragons. And that took a lot out of me. And, when things slowed down during the pandemic, it was a time to also kind of reevaluate and go, okay, doing both these things at the same time, essentially 2 full-time careers has been, I've learned a lot. It's been amazing, but I need to choose one. And when my wife and I talked about it, the reality is it was like, you can't stop telling stories. Like that's just kind of built into who you are. But, the nature of education's changing and you've done the teaching thing now, and you're proud of what you've done there, but that was the one that I could step away from. And so earlier this year, I stepped away from the university and now I'm full-time writing, which is pretty crazy. It feels weird to be back, just as a freelancer, but It's also feels good because I can just focus and concentrate on the work. And I can also do a lot more conventions. So I used to have to turn down shows all the time because of the school schedule and because of, teaching. And now it's sort of like, oh, that sounds like a neat opportunity. Let's travel. Let's go. So this year's been pretty travel heavy, probably my busiest year ever in terms of conventions. And I've done more international shows than I've done in quite some time. So the Conan series is now in 11 languages. So we are all over the world. And so the kind of opportunities now to go to places I haven't been able to go to and be able to promote the series. And, I was in England in May, and then we took a quick jump over to Spain, and 3 of the artists that I'm working with are Spaniards. So we got to hang out and in person and do store signings and really kind of bond in a way that I just haven't been able to do with some of these other artists over the years. So again, it's just made it even more special.
Well, I see that you're on the New York Comic Con website twice.
Yeah.
So are you in your doppelganger showing up, or?
I have no idea how they organize that stuff. I assume they just.
There's 2 pictures of you right in a row. So.
Oh, that's weird. They must have cut and pasted the thing and they're not even paying attention. But yeah, it's great. I'm really looking forward to being back in New York. I was there in 2023, right after the launch, and then I wasn't there last year. So it'll be fun to be back. That's actually the week that 25 comes out. And so it's going to be amazing to have the issue come out on Wednesday. And then we've got the show on Thursday. So I'm going to be, we've got an exclusive cover for New York Comic Con that you can get of issue 25. And it's going to be a ton of fun. I'm really, really looking forward to it.
Now, this writing Conan and being that involved with it, do you have time to do your creator-owned stuff?
Yeah, so I am developing a new creator-owned series. It's been a little bit slower, obviously, because I am doing a lot of work with the Conan franchise. Beyond the comic book stuff, I'm also doing some consulting on other media things. So It's keeping me out of trouble, but I've got a new creator-owned book that I'm slowly plugging away on, and I've got an artist attached, and we are chipping away at it, and we want to have a bunch of material before we announce it. So I've got that, and then a couple other projects here and there, just other little writing things. I've got a story in a Predator anthology coming from Marvel end of the month, and then I've also got just a couple other irons in the fire on potential writing projects. So we'll see how all that stuff goes. But it's nice to have sort of like Conan as the bedrock of the whole thing. It's like, okay, I know on a month-to-month basis I'm definitely doing at least this, and then other opportunities as they come.
Do you have any? So, God, I had a brain fart. I had a
no
question.
Worries.
So looking ahead, you've got a runway for about 50 issues or so. Plus, I mean, if the opportunity presented itself, would you be able, or do you think you could go more than 50? Would you want to go more than 50?
It's funny that's the question that keeps coming up. I keep getting asked that over and over again. The big mythic kind of plot line that we're laying out is 50 issues. So I know where we will be at the end of that journey. But that doesn't mean I don't have other stories I could tell. It just won't kind of be within the scope of this whatever mythic arc, this thing that we're putting together. And so I'm sure I will have other stories to tell. And we've talked a little bit about it, like back and forth, but it's not the kind of thing I'm going to need to worry about until at least early 2027. Because then, if we are on time, this will wrap up at the end of 2027. So issue 50 would come out, I think, like November or December 2027. And so then it's like, great, that's a great kind of, earlier that year, we'll already know, okay, are they going to line up another creative team, or what are we going to do next? But I'm not worried about it right now. I'm just focused on 2026 and everything that we've got in the hopper. And that's the nice thing about it, is we've got an amazing team. The editorial crew is great. Chris Butera and Ashley Hodgkins are doing a wonderful job. And I love interfacing with them and chatting about future plans or planning out, okay, we've talked about the big story and they know where everything's going. Now it's just a matter of, hey, remember this piece? We're bringing that back in here. Or, hey, let's add this new thing. Or, I'm always doing research. We've got an amazing guy named Jeffrey Shanks. He is essentially our pulp scholar. In his day job, he works as an archaeologist, and he writes. He's a huge pulp collector, and he knows the Robert E. Howard stuff incredibly well. And so he's a phenomenal resource. He writes these essays in the back of each issue that give readers a little more context for all the stuff that we're utilizing. And then when he and I talk, he's always kind of throwing different pieces at me, or I'm like, hey, this is where the big story's going. And he goes, oh, I just remembered there's this really good thing that you could incorporate, or I know you've got this bigger idea. Did you know in this obscure story here, there's a reference to that you can bring into it? And so he makes the whole thing feel more cohesive. And amongst the hardcore kind of Conan fans who have been reading since the pulps, they deeply appreciate that we're using that material and that we're not ignoring it. And so it's one of those things where I love having him as a resource and someone I can bounce ideas off of and brainstorm things. And he's always got really cool stuff he's pointing me at.
Very cool. Chad?
Yes, I had a question. I'm trying to see.
Going around side, apparently.
Okay, I got it. Once you do your 50 or so issues, what do you hope to be remembered as for your contribution to the Conan legend?
I mean, it's hard to say, and I don't really want to speak. I got to see, make sure we stick the landing. I think that's the most important thing for me. Like, it would be great to be, people are talking about the recent issues and they say, man, this feels like, we're building a classic run. And you're like, that's all you can kind of hope for, that when they talk about a character and then you say, well, what are the great runs? Right. So, obviously you look at something like X-Men and you say, oh man, Claremont and Byrne, or, whatever, Spider-Man. And you're like, oh, it's Michelini and McFarlane, or, John Romita and Stan Lee, or whatever. You're like, you hope to be spoken of in the same kind of breath as any of those, you know, or Roy Thomas and Barry Windsor Smith or John Buscema. Like, I don't have any delusions of grandeur that we're necessarily going to be that, but I think we have to strive. We have to push and push and push and try and make this thing hit as hard as it can every single month. And then in the aggregate, someone else will decide what that means. You know what I mean? In terms of the overall legacy, you don't get to choose that stuff. You know, it gets chosen for you by the readers and by the retailers and by time itself. And so right now we've got an amazing amount of momentum and it feels awesome, but I don't have any assumptions on that front. And I certainly don't, you have to have an ego, I guess, in the broad, strokes to make this stuff at all. But I don't sit there and be like, whatever, I'm up there with the greats or whatever. We all stand on the shoulders of giants in this industry, and all of us in this case with Conan stuff, we're all, paying homage to the master who created it in the first place. And so I would never be so foolish as to say, oh, I'm Robert E. Howard, because I'm not. I didn't create this stuff. But my job is to try and be a really strong link in the chain of this ongoing kind of legacy of the thing. And then, the benefit, of course, is if it goes well and it continues to go well, it's like, then you've got that feather in your cap for the rest of your career. After my name now, it says Dungeons and Dragons and Avengers and all these other things that I've been able to work on. And those, of course, open doors for you, and they provide other opportunities down the line, hopefully.
Right. So let me ask you this, and this is more of a professional opinion kind of question.
Sure.
What is it about Conan that you feel has continued to resonate throughout the generations?
Right. I think the reality is the character is an absolute classic for he exemplifies a lot of core kind of qualities of the kind of survivor explorer that we all wish we could be. There is a macho-ness, but if you actually read the original stories, it's not whatever you want to call it, toxic masculinity. Right. He is a survivor. He puts himself into these unknown places, and wherever Conan goes, things are going to change. Governments are going to fall, and religions are going to be tested, and monsters are going to be slain, and gods are going to shudder because Conan is a force of change. And all of us wish that we could be that kind of a survivor and be that kind of person that where we go, we're able to affect change in the world around us. And I think that that's a pretty intrinsic quality.
Oh, that's exciting. I've always, in a way, I've always kind of likened Conan and the Punisher to one another in that, they don't grow, they don't change emotionally, they don't have character arcs. They are forces of nature, and the world around them may change.
Right.
Reacts.
Well, what we wanted, so my friend Robin Laws calls them procedural characters. We don't want to see Columbo go through a big emotional arc. If you ever watch the old detective, Columbo, what we want to see is Columbo thrust into a situation and how he reacts to it. Right. Young Conan's going to act a certain way, and Conan in his prime is going to act another way. And Conan the King, he sort of has an arc in that broader sense that now he can look back at his life and try and make meaning of it all. But the reality is we want to see those characters stay themselves and be thrust into new situations or make hard choices. Exactly. And that's what's interesting about them. And that's what I think, if you can strike the right chord with that character and it feels right, then you're just trying to find, okay, what are the challenges that we can put in front of them?
So looking back on your career and where you are now and where you were, what have you learned that you feel is the most important? Was there any advice that you received from someone that you've applied? And what do you wish you could tell your younger self that you know now that you probably
totally
could have benefited?
I mean, the reality is, all these creative projects are collaboration. And if you have to try and be the kind of collaborator that other people want to work with and treat other people the way you want to be treated. This is not my book, it's our book. It's the creative team, right? So currently that's Fernando Dagnino and Diego Rodriguez and, Richard Starkings and Tyler Smith. and Chris Butera and Ashley Hodgkins and Jeff Shanks, and like everyone on that team, I might be the sharp tip of the spear because I'm coming up with those stories, or I'm doing the most kind of marketing and press, putting my name out there because I'm the most consistent credit across every issue, writing it all. But the reality is we're all putting ourselves into this thing. And the more you realize that and the better you treat those other people in the creative team, the better the end result's going to be, and the more opportunities are going to come your way because people love working with you. And so our job is communication and entertainment. And the first people you have to communicate well with and entertain are the people that you're collaborating with. And if you do that well, then a lot of other stuff is going to go a hell of a lot easier. Understanding what people's jobs are and what they do. So I started as an artist, but over the course of years, I did a little bit of coloring, and I did lettering, and I've done editorial. So I've kind of seen almost every position in the comic book production process. And so when I'm asking someone to do something or revise something, I know what I'm asking them to do. I'm not just like, sometimes you work with these clients and they're like, can we make this 15% more exciting? And you're like, what does that even mean? Like, like I know what these processes are. I know how much time it's going to take, to do this thing. And I try as much as, humanly possible to always follow through on my commitments. And if something falls through the cracks, I'm communicating, I'm not ghosting anyone. And like all this stuff that sounds so obvious, but you'd be shocked, all the horror stories you hear from other freelancers who are dealing with difficult, situations with other freelancers. And so I just try really, really hard to be the kind of collaborator and creator and cheerleader that I want to, work with as well. And then everything goes a hell of a lot easier. If I was starting over, the good thing is now is we have like crowdfunding and stuff. When I was starting out, that did not exist. My first website, I literally hand coded my first website back in like 1998. And so, the nascent internet was a very, very different thing. But now, with social media and with crowdfunding, there's more opportunity than ever before. You can build an entire career outside of the major publishers and be just as creatively fulfilled and potentially financially successful doing conventions and doing, self-publishing. So I don't know. It's impossible to say what I would do differently in that way, but there would certainly be a lot more opportunity. And I would have encouraged myself, if I had that ability, to put out more work sooner, because the stuff that I learned, the first couple of projects that I did, I was so timid about trying to get stuff out there. Like I thought that first project was going to be, everything. And you're just like, no, it's aggregate. You have to put out tons and tons of work before it gets good and before people see it and any other kind of opportunities are going to flow. And that's something I always try and encourage people. I'll see a portfolio from an artist and they've got like 3 or 4, pretty professional looking pages. And I'm like, great, now you should do, 20 and do a complete issue. And they're like, 20 pages for a portfolio. I'm like, what do you think the job is? Like, literally, you're going to be doing this potentially monthly. If you can't do one full issue, to show people what you're capable of, you're certainly not going to be able to do this for a career. So, yeah.
Well, I think that's awesome. And I think the book is awesome. So,
thanks, man. Yeah, we're super proud.
I have to tell you, I've been a lifelong comics reader, and Conan never on my radar. Just wasn't. No reason. And your volume started, and I took a look at that De La Torre art, and I said, holy smoke.
Right? It's so phenomenal.
What have I been missing out on? And it's been a hell of a ride since then. So
thank you. Yeah. I hear that from a lot of people. I think, we're seeing a lot of old time fans coming back. I've got guys old enough to be my dad, coming over to meet me at conventions. That's awesome. I can tell they've never read any of my other stuff before because they'll call me Grim Jim, which is the nickname from the credits in Conan. And they're talking about, when they read my book, they feel like they're 15 again, or they haven't collected comics regularly in 20 plus years. And now they've come back on a monthly basis because of this book. And so I'm really proud of that. There's a whole other kind of forked path of people who've never read Conan like yourself. And this series has also brought them in the door. So I feel like we're kind of like relinking that chain of past and present and future potential fans that we've got a lot of fans who, for example, play Conan Exiles or Age of Conan, the video games. If you look on YouTube, there's more Conan video game content than there is probably literary and comic book content. And so that is a huge untapped market of potential readers who are starting to come on board the comics and realizing that this stuff is really awesome and they can pick it up on a monthly basis. And so I don't feel like it has to be just old school, or it has to be, people my age, or it has to be whatever for the youth or anything like that. I feel like the character really is an icon and it's timeless. It is like a Batman or a Wonder Woman or a Spider-Man, like, and older than Superman, like I said. So, the character has a 90+ year publishing legacy that we are now the next sort of step in that, ongoing journey. And that's what's really exciting about it.
Awesome. Well, Jim, thank you so much for your time tonight.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me, man.
Love talking.
Where can people find you? I know you have your Substack, would you call it the Zubstack?
That's right. Yeah, so everything's linked from my website. Like I said, I've had my own website for like 26, 27 years. So if you go to jimzub.com, it's just JIMZUB.com. That's everything. It's got all my social media links. It's got the subscription to the Zubstack. There's also like 40+ free articles about how to write comics. Everything I learned about how to pitch a story, how to work with editors, how to find an artist, the economics of a creator-owned series, and my own journey on that with Skull Kickers and Wayward, the 2 image books that I did that really kind of transformed my career, talking about the highs and lows and getting those out the door. Just really kind of unvarnished information that a lot of people have told me they found helpful over the years. And that stuff's all free. You can check it out. And then if you want to dig even deeper, I do have a Patreon. And on that Patreon, there are like 300+ scripts that I've written. So you can compare what I gave the editor and to what was finally published and see exactly what I sent to the artist.
Now, am I correct that you recently funded the Skull Kickers collection on Zoop?
Yeah, so we just did a reprint. So the Skull Kickers was my sort of breakout book at Image back in 2010. And it's been, the volumes at Image had been falling out of print for a while, and we were talking about what to do with it. And then I was talking to the crew over at Oni, and those compact volumes have been just all the rage in all the bookstores. They've been everywhere. And I'm like, look, I'm writing Conan right now. I've done tons of D&D stuff. This stuff cannot stay, out of print. And so Oni's doing these new compact volumes. All 3 books are going to be in this nice little slipcase that's coming out in the spring. And so a whole new audience that knows me from Conan, or might know me from Marvel stuff or Street Fighter or Samurai Jack and other things like that, are going to get a chance to dig in with my first fantasy book. And so it's going to be really fun to have it back on shelves and have it back in hand when I'm at conventions.
And am I correct that you also did Rick and Morty a little bit?
Yeah, so I did the Rick and Morty versus Dungeons and Dragons 2 miniseries there. And then we also did a third one, Rick and Morty versus Cthulhu. And that was tons of fun. Troy Little, the artist on that, absolutely crushed it. The first D&D miniseries I co-wrote with fantasy author Pat Rothfuss, and we had a ton of fun collaborating with each other. And then I solo wrote the sequel and Cthulhu. And Troy's been, he's the constant on all 3 of those series. And he is one of the best damn cartoonists in the business. And he and I just we really, really gelled and had a ton of fun. And so those books have always, the best compliment that we got for the Rick and Morty D&D stuff was when the book was originally announced, people were like, oh, it's another crass crossover. It's just like, money grab or whatever. And then the reviews when the first issue came out, people were like, this is better than it has any right to be. And you're like, good.
Yes.
Good. That's the way it should be,
So we can expect Rick and Morty and Conan?
I don't have any current plans for that, but if Troy's on board drawing it, I would certainly be up for more Rick and Morty stuff in the future.
Well, okay.
All right, Matt. I will stop.
Are you sure?
Interrupting you? And yes, I think I'm good.
No worries.
Jim, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it. And love Conan. Go check it out from Titan Comics. It's excellent. It's worth your time, and you can support a local comic book store while you do it. So get out there and do some good in the world. Support local art, support local music, local comic book stores. Just whatever you do, don't be a dick. Thank you kindly, and we will catch you next time.
Take it easy.